Hey everybody, welcome to the OklaRoots YouTube channel. Today's tutorial is for the Swoon Bonnie Bucket Bag. This is one of the most popular Swoon bags I see being made, and there are so many variations to this bag. I've seen it as a purse, I've seen it as a backpack, I see it as just like a crossbody bag, so many options. So I'm going to show you the first Bonnie Bucket bag I made. Now, this bag was made entirely following the pattern. I didn't do any sort of alterations whatsoever. It's got the strap just like the pattern suggests. It's got the zipper just like the pattern suggests. You can see the cool thing about this bag is that it's got like a bucket shape. So it kind of slouches a little bit. Now I used firmer fabric here. I used some canvas so it's not as slouchy. It's got this super cool pocket on the front. That's almost like a hidden pocket. But you can see, you open it up, you have that super sweet little pocket on the front. It goes between both of these panels. On the top, you have this like recessed zipper. Open that up. And then on the inside, it's just completely open. Well, I've got some masks in there because, you know, sign of the times. But inside, it's just totally open. There's no pockets or anything on the inside. You could definitely add a zip pocket, little slip pockets, anything you wanted on there. And then on the bottom, we have this nice, firm, rounded bottom. So I would say this is definitely an enthusiastic beginner pattern. I'm going to be brutally honest with you guys. I finished this bag. I didn't like it. I know it's pretty, but I put it on. And I don't know, maybe I am a crossbody bag person. I'm not a shoulder bag person. I felt like it wasn't quite slouchy enough. I think that's because I used the canvas, but it just, I don't know. For some reason, I didn't love it. And so many people online adore this bag. And other people have seen this bag that I've made in person, and they adored this bag. So I am definitely the outlier in this data group. I didn't love it. I'll be honest, I actually really enjoyed making it. Making the bag was really fun. It's a fun make. It's not terribly difficult. It's satisfying. But in the end, I just kind of thought, I don't know. So I decided to make a second version, and I only changed a couple things. I didn't do the backpack version, which if some of you guys have seen, there's some really, really amazing alterations to this pattern out there. So for the second version, I actually used some vinyl as well as my quilt cotton. And the vinyl is just very slouchy vinyl, so it slouches more. I decided to turn this into a crossbody because I love crossbodies. And then I changed the zipper up top so that it has these panels. I'll show you. So you can see the zipper sticks out on the end, and we have these panels up top, so it's just a little bit bigger of an opening. And then as well as that, I put little feet on the bottom. So I do prefer these changes. In today's tutorial, I'm going to show you how to do the crossbody. I'm not going to include a tutorial at this moment for these extended zipper panels. If you're interested in that, leave a message down in the comment section down below. Also, there is an amazing version of this bag out there where there are grommets along the top and a drawstring and some hooks and straps to make this a backpack. Oh my gosh. If you would like to see a tutorial for that, please leave it down in the comment section down below. When we do a tutorial for a bag for the first time, I really want to just kind of stick to the pattern because a lot of people who buy the pattern just want to make what the pattern suggests. I'll add little tweaks here and there, but I didn't want the first Bonnie Bucket bag we did to be the full-on alteration. So if that's something you're interested in, I can definitely put a video together for that. I'm personally very excited to make that other version of the bag. But for today, we're going to stick with the pattern. The only change I'm making is the strap, and that's just because I need a crossbody strap. Let me show you how this looks. So yeah, with crossbody, we can make this nice and high like that. We can make it nice and low. You can shorten the strap to make it just a nice little shoulder bag. All right, as always, there will be timestamps for every single step of this tutorial. They will be located in the comment section at the very top. It is a comment from me. I have every step labeled, and there will be a time right next to it. Just click on that number and it'll take you straight there in the video. If you're not already a subscriber to the channel, please consider clicking subscribe down below. If you have any questions, comments, shout-outs, anything you want to say, leave them in the comment section. You can also email me at jessica@OklaRoots.com. If at any point you like this video, please give it a like. All right, let's get started. So for the exterior of the bag, I'm going to be using this beautiful vinyl. This is from My Punk Broidery. I'll have a link down in the description of this video of where you can find this. And I'm going to be using quill cotton. Now this is part of the Tula Pink homemade collection. You're going to need a half of a yard of each of these. For the lining, I will also be using quill cotton. You'll need 2/3 of a yard of lining fabric. For my strap, since I am adjusting it and instead of using a shorter strap, I'll be doing a crossbody, I have this other fabric right here. This is also from Tula Pink. And for this, you're going to need a cut of fabric that is 4 inches by 42 inches long. So I'll be using a few different types of interfacing today. First is this woven fuse from Got Interfacing. You're going to need 2.5 yards of this. You can also use Shapeflex or SF101 by Pellon. I know that SF101 can be a little bit difficult to find at the moment, so check gotinterfacing.com and see if you can find just the woven fuse. So the pattern suggests using a heavy sew-in stabilizer such as Pellon Peltex 70. I'm actually using a fusible heavy stabilizer, so I'm using Peltex 71F. It just depends what you have. You only need 1/4 of a yard of it. It's just for the base of the bag to provide a nice firm bottom. And this part's totally optional, but for my strap, I'm going to be using Decoville Light. I really like the feel of cotton woven with Decoville Light. I feel like it gives it almost like a soft leather feel for a strap. It's my go-to strap option. You don't have to use Decoville Light if you don't have it or if you don't want to use it on your machine. You can definitely use SF101 or the woven fuse. So for zippers and hardware, you're going to need a zipper for the very front of the bag. This needs to be 7 inches or longer. For the top of the bag, you're going to need a 15-inch or longer zipper. I'll be using zipper tape from Sally Tomato. Instead of the O-rings, I'll be using these 1-inch rectangle rings. And for my crossbody strap, I'm going to use 2 1-inch swivel hooks and a 1-inch slider. Okay, and here is all the other stuff. I'll be using these Kai scissors today. I'll also be using this seam ripper and stiletto. To help keep everything in place, I'll be using this leather tape as well as this Dritz 1/4-inch tape and this Beacon 3-in-1 glue. For marking my fabric, I have a chalk pencil, a friction eraser pencil, and an air erasable pencil. On my machine today, I'll be using this Universal 9014 needle. I do prefer to use a Microtex 8012 needle, but this is what I have on hand today. And my thread will be this Aurifil cotton thread, which is 40 weight. And of course, a healthy supply of clips. I will be clipping a lot. Links for all of these things are down in the description of the video. So one of the first things you're going to cut out are your main panel pieces. Now make sure you know which side is up on your main panel pieces. The font is going in the right direction. As you can see, I cut my cotton fabric in the wrong direction. This is upside down, which means that in the end result, my sewing machines on this beautiful fabric will be upside down on the bag. Now, if I were making this bag for someone else, I would definitely recut these pieces. However, I don't have much more of this fabric, definitely not enough to recut these pieces. This bag is for me, and at this point in time, the way everything is going in the world, things feel a little upside down, so I'm just going to say this was artistic design. So you're going to need to take your main panel piece and cut 2 main exteriors and 2 basic exteriors. These are going to need to be reversed. So one you're going to cut with the pattern piece face up, and the other you'll cut with the pattern piece face down. So you want the opposite fabrics to be mirrored images of one another. Also, for the exterior of the bag, you're going to need to cut 2 of these bottom strip panels. These can be from either one of the fabrics or a totally different fabric. For the lining, you'll notice you have a top lining template and a bottom lining template. We're going to be attaching the zipper in between these in a later step. You're going to need 2 cuts of each of these. From your bottom panel template, you're going to need to cut an exterior for your bottom and a lining piece. You'll also have a separate template for the bottom support. Since I'm using a fusible support and I don't feel comfortable fusing it onto my vinyl, I will be fusing this onto the lining panel of the bag. From your lining fabric, you're going to need to cut 1 pocket panel and 1 pocket facing. These are the only 2 pieces of lining fabric that do not need to be interfaced at all. Using one of your exterior prints, you're going to need to cut 2 pocket welts. From the exterior fabric, these do not need to be interfaced with woven interfacing. For the strap, you're going to need to cut a 42-inch by 4-inch long strip of fabric, and I have this interfaced with the Decoville Light. You also need to have a strap connector cut. The measurements for this are in the pattern. And just a quick reminder that all cotton fabric, except for the pieces that I specifically noted, need to be interfaced with woven interfacing. So in the pattern, she has you take your bottom support, lay it over your exterior bottom panel and then fuse your woven interfacing over this. What that's going to do is going to hold everything in place really nicely. Since I'm using vinyl for my exterior bottom panel and I have a fusible heavy interfacing, I am actually going to adhere this to the lining. Now, if you're not adding any sort of feet to your bag, this is definitely okay. You're still going to have nice support in your bag. If you will be attaching feet to the bottom of the exterior of your bag, you will want to use some scraps of this stabilizer with the feet when you're installing them. I'm not going to be installing the feet in the bag today. Just make note that you will want to install the feet with some of this extra stabilizer. So to adhere my stabilizer, I'm just going to take the stabilizer glue side down and center it on my lining panel, just like this. And then I take the whole unit and flip it so that we have a lining side up. And then I grab my iron and using a good amount of steam, I just fuse these two pieces together. All right, once you have that fused on, you can go ahead and put this to the side. So let's go ahead and build our main panels. You're going to want to take one of each of your fabrics and lay them together so that the top curved edges go down and meet in the middle. So the shorter of the vertical edges should be matching. Once you have it laid out the way you like, we're just going to flip these right sides together and align them on that shorter edge. And then you can just clip these together. Okay, and we can do the same thing with the other two units. We'll just lay these right sides together, again, clipping on that shorter vertical edge. So once you have both of your panels clipped, we can take this to the sewing machine and we're going to sew along these clipped edges at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So once you have these units sewn together, what you're going to want to do is just press this seam allowance open. Obviously, if you're using vinyl, you're not going to be able to press it with an iron. You can just give it a good finger press and you'll be fine. So once you have this mid seam pressed to the best of your ability, we're going to go back to the sewing machine and we're going to top stitch on both sides of that seam. We're going to top stitch a 1/4 inch away from the seam on the fabric side and on my vinyl side. So once you have both of your panels sewn together and top stitch, you're going to pick one of them that's going to hold the pocket. So if you have a print that is centered in a certain way that you want to keep that way, leave that one to the side and use the other one for your pocket. All right, so let's start building our pocket for the front of our bag. Go ahead and flip your panel so that it's right side down. And in the pattern, they tell you how far to mark up from the bottom of your panel. So I'm just going to line up my ruler on the bottom and mark all the way up. And then using the center seam and my 3.5 inch mark on my ruler, I'm going to draw a 7-inch horizontal line. So it's going to be 3.5 inches from each side of that seam. I'm going to draw a second horizontal line that's just a 1/2 inch above that first one. Again, 7 inches long. And then you can just connect the ends just like this. You know, it can be kind of hard to see on the black. Okay, and what you can do here to help with the next step is grab a couple of pins and just put these pins right in the middle of that rectangle. This is going to get cut out, so it's okay if you are using vinyl and you pierce a hole here. You're not going to keep this piece later. So there we go. So I just put 2 pins in there just like that. So when I flip it right side up, I see these pinned marks. Now this is going to be helpful when I'm doing my pocket facing. So grab your cut of fabric that is your pocket facing and you're going to lay this right side down and centered over your pinned marks. So what you can do is just fold it in half, wrong sides together a little bit, and then line up the fold right on top of those pins. and then push it back down just like this. This doesn't have to be perfect, but you don't want it to be too far off from that rectangle you drew on the back. It's just going to make it more difficult later. So you can use pins or whatever you like to hold this in place, but what I'm going to do is just use some Scotch tape, something that will easily come off later. And what we want to do is just hold this pocket facing in place because we're going to sew from the opposite side and we don't want this moving around. So I'm just going to put some tape on all four corners. And again, if you have washi tape, you could even use regular tape, any type of tape. If you're using all quilt cotton here, you could definitely just use pins right here. I just don't want to pierce my lining because this will stay seen in the end. Okay, so once again, flip over your main unit. You can go ahead and remove those pins from the back. And now what we're going to do is we're going to sew along our rectangle. All right, so as you saw, my duct tape was more interested in sticking to the sewing machine than it was into sticking with the fabric. So I struggled a little bit, but that's just an example of why I always have my seam ripper right by my side. So now we're gonna draw a line in this rectangle that is halfway between it. So it's 1/4 of an inch from each line. Just draw it like that. And then you wanna draw another line about 1/2 of an inch in, just like this. All right, so from this intersection, you can just sketch a diagonal to the corner of your rectangle. So go ahead and grab your seam ripper to get this started. And we're going to be cutting through the main panel and that piece of fabric on the back. So I just start with the seam ripper like that. And then I grab some scissors, usually smaller scissors, and just cut along that middle line. And then also cut along those diagonal lines that go to the corner. So all the way up to that. And you want to get really, really close to those stitches without actually cutting the stitches. Okay, so now what you can do is flip it right side up and just push that pocket facing through that hole, just like this. All the way in, flip it over, and you're just trying to flatten out that seam as best you can. If you're using vinyl, you're probably going to want to use some clips here to help hold it all in place. This looks kind of nuts, but what I do is I clip it first because that really helps me get everything smoothed out. And then I press it to keep it in place. There we go. And I do press the vinyl side. I just make sure my iron doesn't touch the vinyl and it only touches the back of it. So the vinyl has this cloth backing and the iron can go on that. But you can see vinyl doesn't stay down as well as we would like it, like the quilt cotton does, and that's okay. So I'm just gonna leave a couple clips on the vinyl half for now, and we'll be able to hold that down whenever we go to sew it with the zipper. So go ahead and put this to the side. Now we're going to be working with the pocket welts. So grab those. You're going to take one of them and fold it wrong sides together, hot dog style, and then press. So now grab your other pocket welt. You can unfold the one you pressed and lay it right sides together, matching up all four edges. You can clip this together if it helps. And you don't have to press this in order to find that midpoint mark. You could also just measure it and mark it with your marker. Okay, so now we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to sew along this crease. So once you have your pocket welts sewn together, you're going to actually just press each one of the welts wrong sides together and then all of it away from each other. So what we're ending up with is two pieces of fabric that are folded in half and sewn together along their folded edge. You can give this a press just to keep it all in place. So now grab your main panel that has the hole for the zipper and lay that right side down. If you have some of these clips, you can go ahead and remove them. So now what we want to do is we want to center our welts over the back of our main panel. And what we want is for this seam in the middle to be completely centered over this opening. So you can do this a few different ways. You can just fold it and match it up with the midpoints and push it down. What I like to do is clip it along the edges like this, and then flip it over and take a look. I know it's kind of hard with those clips, but just to see if it looks decent. All right, that's about right. So keeping this all together at the sewing machine is probably the most challenging part of this, because when we're sewing, we're actually going to be sewing from the right side, so you don't really want these bulky clips in the way on the back. This is where you can use some fabric glue or some tape, whichever you prefer. I'm going to actually use some of this double-sided Dritz tape just along the edges. So I'm going to unpin and attach this to the raw edge of the side of my welt that's going to be going up against the fabric for the facing. Once I have one side taped down, I'll do the same with the other side. All right, once you have it taped or glued in place, you can flip it over again and just kind of take a look, see how it all holds together. I've got to be honest, I am no expert at this. My pockets are always a little wonky, but in the end, they end up looking great. Okay, so if you just want to leave this as a pocket without a zipper, you're going to skip this next section, but I am going to show you how to attach the zipper as well. So we're actually going to be adding more to this. So once again, we're going to flip this right side down. I'm grabbing about 10 inches of zipper tape because I do want it to overhang on the edges. Nice thing with these zipper tape packages is they come with a bunch of pulls. So I'll just grab one of those pulls and insert this on here. All right, so now I'll lay my zipper right side down. We want the teeth to go right over that center seam. And then just like before, I'm just gonna tape. All right, the tape might be a little overkill. I realize that, but I don't want anything moving. I want to move this zipper pull out of the way as best I can. So I'm just gonna move it close to the edge. I don't like the zipper pull in the middle because it's very difficult to move the zipper because you don't have access to the top of it. So I like it closer to the edge, and then I start close to the zipper and I go around away from it, and as I come back, then I will seam rip the welts and move the zipper in. All right, so you can see that we did get all of it included. You can go ahead and remove your tape. Coordinating thread here, which means thread that matches your fabric, will be your friend. So that way, if you have some wavy seams like I do, it's not so noticeable. You can go ahead and seam rip your entire welt. Okay, but you can see the end result is just beautiful. It's such a clean, cool looking hidden zipper pocket. I don't know. It's a lot of work, but I think it's worth it. So once you have this opening complete, all we have to do is finish off with the pocket. Grab your pocket panel, take your main panel and lay it right side down. If you have some extra zipper over here, you can go ahead and trim that. So now grab your pocket panel, and what we're going to do is we're going to line it up with the top of the top edge of your pocket welt and just clip this in place. So now what we want to do is sew this clipped edge together. And I'm going to sew these at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. When sewing, you don't want to sew through your main panel, so make sure you leave that out of the way and then just sew along this welt and pocket panel. So now that you have the top of the pocket panel attached, we're going to attach the bottom of the pocket panel. To do that, we're going to attach the bottom just like we did the top, but to the bottom welt. So you're going to lay it right side down against the edge of that bottom welt and clip in place. And just like before, we're going to move the main panel out of the way and we're going to sew along this edge. Again, I'm using about a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I do find that a zipper foot is very helpful because we can get nice and close to this edge without having to go off of the side of our seam. Okay, so now your pocket should look something like this. When you look from the side, you can see that the top and bottom of the pocket panel kind of go away from each other like that. So now we just want to press this whole pocket down. You can use an iron for this, or you can just use your hands. Again, if this isn't perfectly straight, if it's not perfect, just don't stress about it. Okay, so now we're going to work on the sides of our pocket. So just clip along the sides on both sides of your pocket. And now we're going to sew along these pin sides at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Again, keep your main panel out of the way. So I like to have the main panel right side up so that I can just fold it out of the way and sew up the side and not even have to worry about this. All right, so now your pocket should be completely closed up. You can go ahead and put your hand inside of it to check. But there we go. Now we have this beautiful pocket with a zipper installed on the front of your bag. Go ahead and put this to the side while we work on the bottom strips. So I'm using vinyl for my bottom strips, so I'm not going to be able to press these. But what we want to do is fold down the top edge. Now the top edge can be a little bit difficult to tell, but this is not actually a perfect rectangle. There is a slant to the edge that's opposite the fold. So one edge of your bottom strip is going to be shorter than the other edge. So I'll show you. I don't know if you can see, but this edge right here is just slightly shorter than the bottom edge. You want to work with the shorter edge on the top right now. And if you're ironing this, this is much easier, but what we want to do is press this down 1/2 inch. So I'm going to use my ruler and a chalk pencil to measure 1 inch from the raw edge, and then just draw a line like that. And then again over here, 1 inch. Kind of hard to do with a black vinyl on black mat. All right, so there's one. I'm gonna do the same thing with the other strip. Find my shorter edge. And then once again, just mark a 1 inch line from that shorter top edge. Okay, so if you were using quilt cotton here, you can go ahead and take an iron and fold these wrong sides together and press along that edge. Since I'm using vinyl, honestly, the best way to hold this all together is by using this 1/4 inch leather double-sided tape, but it does gunk up my needle so badly. So let's try the Dritz 1/4 inch wash away tape and see if that can hold this together. The hard thing with vinyl is that since it's thicker, it doesn't want to stay together as much as quilt cotton does. Let's try this. So I'm just laying this double-sided tape right above my marked line. And then I'll remove the paper. And then I'll fold this top raw edge down to meet my marked line. Just like this. So it's sticking to that double-sided tape. All right, it looks like it's sticking okay. So that's good. I was worried it wouldn't stick. All right, so that works. That's good. This tape is much easier on my needle than the leather tape. So go ahead and do the same thing for the other bottom strip. Alrighty, so now your bottom strips should both have their top edges folded under. So now what we're going to do is we're going to add these to our main panels. So grab your main panel that has the pocket. Before we get started, make sure that the pocket is all the way down. We're actually going to be sewing over this pocket. So if you need to, add a couple pieces of tape down here. Just to make sure this doesn't get out of the way, we want the pocket to be sewn in the next step. So go ahead and flip your main panel so that it's right side up, and we're going to be working on the bottom of the main panel. Grab one of your pocket panels with the folded edge facing into the center of the main panel and line it up over the bottom of your main panel. You can see we're not attaching this on the edge, we're just overlaying it. It's going to line up just perfectly with that bottom edge. There we go. And then go ahead and pin this in place. So now we're going to go sew this on. Along this folded edge right here, we're going to top stitch at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Along the other 3 edges, we're just going to baste at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. If you're using vinyl like I am, it does like to move around during this step. If you have a walking foot, that would be great right here just to kind of keep it all together. What I like to do is sew along the bottom edge first and then top stitch the top and then do the sides. I find that that helps prevent shifting the most. So before we take this to the sewing machine, let's go ahead and prep the other main panel. So this will be your main panel without the pocket. So sad to see this upside down, isn't it? All right, let's take this to the sewing machine. Alrighty, so you should now have your bottom panels attached. If you taped down your pocket, you can go ahead and remove that tape. And you can see that the pocket is actually sewn in. This is intentional. This is so your pocket doesn't get all bunched up inside your bag. So now grab both of your exterior panels and we're going to sew them together. So lay them right sides together. And if you want to go ahead and check your edges, if you have some of your bottom panel that's just a little bit longer than your exterior panel, you can trim those down. And with your panels right sides together, we're going to clip along the vertical edges. Now, what I like to do first is match up those folds on my bottom panel because I really want this to line up appropriately based off of that accent. So I line those up first, and then I'll just pin up the rest of the side. Do the same for the other side as well. And now we're going to sew along both of these clipped edges at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Make sure you backstitch well at the top and the bottom, especially the bottom, because we're going to be pulling on those seams in the next step. Once you have it all sewn together, go ahead and trim your seam allowance down to about a 1/4 inch. This is just removing some of the bulk from the seam. If you're using really thick material right here, what you might want to do is do a second row of stitching just to the outside of your first row. So like a 1/16 of an inch away, right along that stitching, just to make sure these stitches don't get pulled on. Since I'm using a combination of vinyl and quilt cotton, I'm not too concerned about it. But if I was using all vinyl right here, I would add a second row of stitches so that whenever we turn it right side out, we don't see the stitches in that seam on the exterior. Now you're going to grab your bottom panel and you're going to fold it in half. You do the short edges first and then just mark where that halfway part is. We're marking our midpoints. We're going to mark all 4 of them. So do the top and the bottom with matching the short edges. And now we're going to fold it long edges together and do the same thing. Your other markings should meet up like that. And then fold it in half. You should now have 4 marks on your bottom panel. And we're going to use the bottom of our exterior unit. And you'll notice we have the midpoints already marked here. We have seams on 2 of them. And then we have these seams for the exterior panels on the other one. So take your bottom panel and lay it right sides together with the bottom of your exterior panel. Mark up the midpoint on the long edge with the seam separating your 2 exterior fabrics. And then just clip together. Now do the same thing on the opposite side. Again, we're working with the long edge of the bottom panel. And clip it right sides together, lining it up with that seam between the 2 exterior panels. And clip. All right, now we're going to go to the short edges of our bottom panel. And those are going to be lined up with the seam connecting the 2 outer panels. There you go. And then go around to the opposite end, do the same. Okay, once you have the 4 marks clipped, we can just go around and clip the rest of the edge. The more clips you use here, the easier it's going to be to sew. I know that sometimes this stuff kind of doesn't want to behave for us and gets all bundled up. You just kind of have to manipulate it with your fingers, fold it a little bit out, fold it in, do whatever you need to get it all clipped and prevent as much bunching as possible. If you have a little bit of a pleat, that's okay. If you were adding purse feet, you should add them to your bottom panel before you clip it together. You can still add the purse feet after you sew it all together. It's just a little bit more difficult. So if you're adding purse feet, now's a good time to get those on before you clip all this together. There we go. Now we have the bottom completely clipped. We're going to take this to the sewing machine and we're going to sew along this clipped edge at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. If you've sewn curves with me before, you know that I find them challenging. My strategy is to use as many clips as possible. I mean, I will keep adding clips just like this. Make sure it's all full. I do not remove the clip until my presser foot is touching the clip. So keeping everything together and clipped together for as long as possible is going to help you keep all of these edges nicely lined up. All right, once you have it all sewn together, we can just trim down this seam allowance to 1/4 inch. All right, once you have that trimmed down, you can go ahead and turn this right side out. And this is just nice to have a little look at all your hard work so far. You can go ahead and put this to the side while we work on the strap. First, let's make the strap connectors. Since I'm using vinyl, I'm not going to be pressing this. So instead, I'm just going to mark the midpoint on this strap. To make it a little bit easier, I'm going to use a different background instead of the black on black. That way I can actually see what I'm doing. All right, so mark that. And now using your clips, fold up the long edges to meet that marked line and just clip in place. If you're using quilt cotton here, you can go ahead and just press it with an iron. You won't need to use any clips. It should stay just fine without them. And do the same with the other long raw edge. Just fold them wrong sides together to meet that midline. Now you could also use glue or double-sided tape here to hold this all together. What we're going to do is take this to the sewing machine and we're going to sew along these folded edges at an 1/8 inch seam allowance. So once you have your strip top stitch, you can fold it right sides or wrong sides together, matching up the short edges that are raw, and then cut along that fold. We're just cutting this directly in half. There you go. Now grab your round or rectangle rings, and we're going to slide one strap into it, and then just fold it so that you have the raw edges together on the back. This way everything is nice and clean. We don't have any raw edges showing except for this end over here. Go ahead and clip these together. Do the same with the other ring. So now we're going to secure this in place at our sewing machine. Just sew right up against that rectangle ring on top of your vinyl or your cotton, whatever you're using for your strap. I like to use a zipper foot so that I can get as close as possible to this ring without hitting it. You'll also want to go over the top stitching that you already have on your rectangle ring just to hold all the layers together nicely. Once you have your strap connectors stitched in place, we just have to add them to the bag. So what you want to do is center the strap connector along the seam that's between the two sides on your bag. So these go on the sides of the bag. Clip them on just like that. There we go. Now we're just going to go to the sewing machine and baste these on at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So you can now take your exterior and put this to the side. We're going to work on the lining. Okay, so if you're using zipper tape, you're going to need to go ahead and cut this. I'm going to cut mine at about 16 inches just to make sure I have a little more if I need it. Don't forget to add your zipper pull. This zipper tape that I'm using today is from Sally Tomato, and these are plastic teeth, so I don't have any problem sewing over these at all. But if you want to make sure your zipper pull doesn't fly off while you're working, go ahead and stitch down the ends. So grab your top lining panels, and you're going to lay your top lining panel so that it's curved side down, right side up. Take your zipper and lay your zipper right side down along your lining panel. Now, if your zipper is longer than your lining panel, that's perfectly fine. And then clip along this straight edge of the top lining panel with the zipper. We're going to take this to the sewing machine, and using our zipper foot, we're going to sew on this zipper at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now grab one of your bottom lining panels and lay this right side down over that edge you just sewed. Make sure it's lining up with the top lining panel. So if your zipper is a little bit long, make sure you don't line up the edge with the edge of the zipper. We want this to be lined up neatly with the top lining panel. And then just clip it into place. Okay, so now all you have to do is flip this over so that you can see your previous stitches and just go right over those stitches. Now we're including that bottom lining panel in the sandwich. Once you have this all sewn together, all we have to do is press the zipper away from the top and bottom. We're not going to be top stitching this, so you want to try to get it pressed away from the zipper. All right, so this is what you should be left with. Now we're going to go ahead and repeat that with the other side of the zipper. So I'm going to kind of go through that quickly. So before we attach this to the other side, I'm going to go ahead and trim down my zipper so that it's the same length as my top lining panel on the short edge. That's just going to make it easier lining up the rest of this. So grab your other lining panel and then lay it so that the lining panel is right side up and the straight long edge is up top. Grab the unsewn edge of your zipper and lay that right side down, lining it up with the right side of your lining panel, and clip along that straight edge. All right, now let's go sew along this edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, once you have that sewn on, just grab the last remaining bottom lining panel and make sure you're lining up the shorter edge with your zipper, not that longer edge on the bottom. We're doing the shorter edge and just line it up top with your sandwich and clip in place. Okay, once you have that in there, we can just flip it over and go back to the sewing machine and just sew over those previous stitches. And just like before, we'll just pull both of these panels away from the zipper. So now your lining is ready to be completed. Go ahead and take your lining and lay them right sides together. They should naturally want to do that because that zipper is between them. And we're going to clip along both of the vertical edges. When you're clipping, make sure your zipper teeth are pressed down towards the bottom of the lining. And when you sew this, you're going to sew over those plastic teeth with them going towards the bottom of the lining. Okay, after you have both of your vertical edges pinned, you're going to want to mark a 6-inch opening on one of the sides. It doesn't really matter which one, but just mark 6-inch opening so that you can turn the bag right side out in the end. Also, make sure your zipper is about halfway open. And we're going to take this to the sewing machine and sew along these edges at a 1/2 inch seam allowance, once again skipping over this opening between our two marks. All right, once we have the sides sewn on, let's go ahead and trim these down to a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Leave the section that you didn't sew untrimmed. So we want to keep this at a 1/2 inch. It's going to make it easier to close in the end. So now grab your bottom lining panel, and we're going to fold it just like we did with the exterior bottom panel, and just find all of the 4 midpoints. So I start with my short edges together first, that midpoint, and then do the longer edges as well. For the lining panel, you have 2 of the midpoints marked on the edges, but you're going to still need to find the middle of the lining. So you can just pull these so that you have the seams matching on the bottom, right sides together, and then just mark where the middle of those seams are. There you go. Okay, and just like before, we're going to attach our bottom panel to the other panels right sides together. So right sides together, we're going to match up the midpoints on the longer sides first, and then just add a clip right where those lines match up. And then go ahead and do the shorter sides, which are the seams for the lining panels. And then go around the entire curve, clipping all of the raw edges together. If you added the stiff interfacing to the lining like I did, you might notice that everything just kind of bowls up around it. That's totally fine if the clips go up like that. It makes it a little bit easier to do this part. Okay, so now we're going to go to the sewing machine and sew along this rounded edge at 1/2 inch seam allowance. What I do instead of worrying about the seam allowance is I use my zipper foot and I just sew right up against the stiff interfacing without actually sewing on the interfacing. So I'm just going to go right up against the whole thing all the way around. So once you have your lining installed, you can go ahead and trim down this seam allowance as well to a 1/4 inch. Let me know if you're finding it easier to do these curves. I personally think that the curves on the Bonnie are much easier to sew than the curves on like the Carter, or definitely easier than the curves on the Olive. However, I've been sewing a lot more curves lately, so I don't know if it's just an easier pattern or if it's just easier for me because I've got more practice doing it. So if you make the Bonnie and you're not a fan of the curves, let me know down in the comments if you found this to be a little bit easier. All right, so now we're going to attach the lining to the exterior. So open up your zipper in your lining, and you shouldn't have to worry about the zipper coming undone anymore. Everything is sewn closed. So open up your lining so that it's right side in, wrong side out. Grab your exterior with the exterior right side out, and we're going to just fold up that exterior and push it right inside of our lining. First, what you want to do is match up the seams for the edge. So example, on the exterior, we have our little tab on there, and just match up those seams as best you can and clip them in place. Do the same on the other side. The seams connecting the 2 big lining panels and the seams connecting the front and back of the exterior. Do your best to line up those seams. And then we'll just go around the entire edge, clipping the raw edges together. Okay, now we're going to go sew this clipped edge at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Alrighty, so now we can go ahead and trim down that seam so that it's about 1/4 inch. As you saw when I was sewing, I like to backstitch and go back over the area where the strap tab is a couple times, just because in a bag that's going to get the most abuse. And from other bags I've made, the strap tab area is what I end up having to fix if I'm wearing them a lot or just filling them with too heavy material too often. So I like to go over those a couple times. All right, so now we can just turn this bag right side out. Be gentle pulling through that hole. You don't want to rip any stitches. All right, now you can just put your hand inside the bag and poke out your seams. It's a little bit easier to do that. And then before we insert this into the bag, let's push out that bottom and close up this hole on the side. So because we left that 1/2 inch seam allowance nice and big over there, we should be able to just kind of push those raw edges in there, pull a little bit at the corners, and then clip along this edge. So now we can go to the sewing machine and just sew along this clipped bit at an 1/8 inch seam allowance. Now that you have that all closed up, you can just push your lining into your bag. And remember, the zipper is not the top of the bag. So if you're pushing your lining in and you're like, it's not reaching the bottom. So now all we have to do is top stitch around this top opening. So you can press this if you'd like. I am going to use my trusty clips as usual. And I'm just going to roll that seam to the edge and then clip the seam in place all the way around the bag. I'm going to top stitch around this entire clipped edge at an 1/8 inch seam allowance. All right, here we go. Your bag is now complete. All we have to do now is finish the strap. And I'm going to be showing you how to make a crossbody strap to go with this. All right, so I have my strap, which is 42 inches long and 4 inches wide. It is quill cotton that is adhered to Decoville Light. This is kind of like my favorite go-to strap combo. What we're gonna do is we're gonna fold it wrong sides together with the long edges together and then just press. Just go along the entire 42 inches. So now we're going to open up that fold and take our long raw edges, wrong sides together, and fold them up to meet that midline fold. You're going to do this with the top and the bottom of your strap. Once you have that pressed, you can just fold the whole thing so that you have the two folded edges up against each other, and just put a few clips here and there. You'll notice that Decoville Light, when it's warm, is very malleable, but once it cools off, it becomes very firm. So you're not going to have to worry about this changing its shape or anything like that. Okay, so now we can take this to the sewing machine and we're going to top stitch an 1/8 inch away from both long edges of our strap. So now we have our strap top stitched. Go ahead and grab your slider. And what we're going to do is we're going to fold down the end of the strap a 1/2 inch, just like that. And then we're going to fold it down again at 1.5 inches. So in the end, when it's all folded, you should have this little sandwich here. So the goal is to sew over this edge right here. If your machine cannot go through this thick bit right here, you can leave it like this and it's totally fine. You don't have to worry about this fabric over here. Slide that folded edge up and over the middle bar of your slider. And you want to nestle the slider in that 1.5 inch fold that you created. And this doesn't have to be exact. Do whatever you're comfortable with. If you want to make this edge a little bit longer, you can go ahead and do that. If you just want to leave it flat like this and top stitch it, that's totally fine. Do whatever you're comfortable with right here because this is very thick. I'm going to use a couple clips to hold it all together. And now what I like to do is do 2 rows of top stitching. I'm going to top stitch as close to the slider as I can, just like that. And I'm going to do another top stitching along the edge over here. So as you can see, it's a little tricky going over this thickness with the sewing machine. It has to do with the Decoville light. If you're using just Woven Fuse or SF101 in your quilt cotton, you're going to be fine. It's just that Decoville light. There's so many layers of it here. With the fabric, it's very tricky. So you don't have to double fold this. You can just lay it flat like this, and it's totally fine. Now let's add the swivel hooks. So add one of your swivel hooks so that it goes on in the opposite side of that folded edge, just like this. So I'm going to add it on. So when you pull the raw edge and the slider together, this should be sticking out. It should be just like this. And you see we have the raw edge and the folded edge right sides together with the swivel hook hanging out over here. Push that end into the slider and then over the middle portion and back around. And the nice thing about this too is that if you ever wanted to switch out the strap, you could. You're not stuck with one strap. All right, so now grab your remaining swivel hook and lay it so that it is on the same side as the slider, right side up, just like that, pointing up. And then once again, you can fold this down 1/2 inch and then 1.5 inches just to secure this swivel hook in place. Pinch it really well, clip this really well, and we're going to go to the sewing machine and once again sew 2 lines, one as close to the swivel hook as we can get, and then one through this very thick mess. Alrighty, let's take a look at it. Oh man, oh man, oh man. Okay, so here's the bag. Let's go ahead and attach our strap to it. I like it. I like that I used a strap that was kind of a crazy color for the bag. Right? Look at this. Oh my gosh, it's so cute. I don't even notice that the sewing machines are upside down. Neither do you, right? Nope, it's not even noticeable, and that's what we're sticking with, okay? Now, I am seriously a huge fan of slouchy bags. Slouchy bags are just some of the cutest bags. You don't have to worry about them kind of banging around things. They are so, so chic, so cute, so easy to wear. You guys can't really see, can you, how this wears. I'll put a picture right here of a full body, how the bag looks on. I love it. Honestly, I love it. And a lot of times when we see people post pictures of their bags, we don't see them actually being worn by people. So how a bag looks on a pretty table with a pretty background is totally different than how it might look when somebody's wearing it. This is a wearable bag. I love it now. I gotta be totally honest. When I first made the Bonnie, I didn't love it. I didn't even really like it. And I think it was completely because of the strap and that I used a very thick, like, painter's canvas. So it was just not slouchy. It just didn't have, here, I'll show you. So here's the first one I made. And you can see it just doesn't have the slouch factor. It's just too stiff. Now maybe I should have pre-washed the canvas to give it a little bit more loose, but it's just too stiff. So I suggest if you're making this bag, make sure you use drapey material, even vinyl. I mean, this is vinyl, but it's very squishy and drapey. It's not super stiff. Wow. Look at that. All right, I'm like, this is my bag. This is the bag I'm going to be wearing out and about. I wish I would have remembered to put a OklaRoots tag on it because I always forget to do that. I'll show you, out of the 3 bags, I did remember to put an OklaRoots tag on one. So there is my tag. If you're making a bag, make sure you put your tag on it. People need to know that you made it. This is such a cute pattern. It comes together very well. This is like in between the Bagstock Sunshine Wristlet and the Carter or the Olive. Like those are much more like you're gonna need a chiropractor afterwards bags, but this is a little bit more advanced than like a boxy bag. So I hope you love the tutorial today. I hope you love this bag. If you make one of these bags, especially after watching this video, please tag me. I would love to see it. Make sure you tag Swoon as well. So I hope you have a great rest of the week. Get out there and make something. Bye.